Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back for another episode of the Libertarian Censored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Censored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have Dodge versus Ford Motor Co. 1919, when corporate shareholder primacy became law versus serving customers or employees, and that's linked to the Wikipedia page for Dodge versus Ford Motor Co. in 1919, and that was posted by Woke Boogeyman. And yeah, personally, let's see, it says George Dodge versus Ford Motor Co. was a case in which the Michigan Supreme Court held that Henry Ford had to operate the Ford Motor Company in the interest of shareholders rather than the benefit of his employees or customers. It is often taught as affirming the principle of shareholder primacy in corporate America, although it is used as a teaching example, has received some criticism. Under some interpretations, the case is also affirmed that the business judgment rule that directors may exercise expansive, leading forward other businesses as a wide latitude about how to run the company. If management decisions can point to any rational link to benefiting the company as a whole, as of 2025 in Delaware, jurisdiction where over half of all U.S. public companies are domiciled, shareholder primacy is still held. And yeah, personally, I think the libertarian position is that if companies want to focus on shareholders first and foremost, they should be able to, but they shouldn't be forced to do so if they don't want to. And that's, I think, very much libertarian position. If they ultimately companies should be served whoever they feel like they're served. If they want to primarily focus on their shareholders, that's fine. If they want to primarily focus on their employees, that's fine. If they want to focus primarily on their customers, that's fine, or maybe a combination of all three. It should be their choice, though, rather than the choice of the state. Next, we have Government Size Has No Sweet Spot from JulianRezka.com, posted by Julian Rezka, and that's a cross post from the Austrian Economics subreddit. And yeah, personally, I would agree with that. Some people might think the government's too big. Some people might think it's too small. Ultimately, every person's going to have a different definition of what size government they want. Personally, I think that's why we need voluntary collectivism rather than forced collectivism. If people want to have voluntary governments, however big they want to, among consenting individuals, I think that's fine. But right now, everyone's forced to collectivize under the same government, even if they think it's too big or too small, and that's ultimately why I think we need a decentralized government as a whole. A lot of things are decentralizing. The media landscape as a whole is pretty decentralizing thanks to social media. I definitely do think government should decentralize as well, so each individual can have the government that they want, rather than them force everyone into a one-size-fits-all model, which tries to please everyone, but which ultimately ends up pleasing no one. Next we have Why Didn't Anyone Warn Us That Trump Would Betray Us, posted by Donald Key, and that's a cross post from the Age Like Milk subreddit, and that looks like a headline from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association from November 6, 2024. Cattle producers congratulate President-elect Trump for his decisive victory, and then it cuts to, looks like a recent tweet from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. No cow-calf producer in America is asking for increased imports, undercutting American farmers and ranchers of products from foreign competitors does nothing to create market confidence or encourage rebuilding the herd. For the second time in less than 12 months, the Trump administration is intervening in markets in an attempt to artificially lower beef prices. Current retail prices are high because of strong consumer demand for the high-quality beef we produce. And yeah, it just goes to show you that, a lot of cow people might have voted for Trump, but that doesn't mean they're gonna like what he does when he interferes in their market. But ultimately, it comes down to I think if people do want to buy their cat beef locally, I think they should be able to. But if they can buy it for cheaper overseas, I do think they should be able to as well. The libertarian position is to be against tariffs. And, usually Trump's very, it's interesting. A lot of times he's very much on the protectionist economic side with stuff like tariffs. But right now, in this case, he's kind of the opposite. He's importing cheap foreign beef to lower the price of beef from other countries. And I think if people want to do that, that's fine. But I don't think the state should be doing it. The state should be focusing on protecting its own beef industry rather than just importing cheap beef from other countries. I think if individuals want to buy beef from other countries, that's fine. But I don't think the state should be intentionally flooding the market with it when it comes to tilting the scale. The state shouldn't be getting involved in the beef wars to begin with. It should be up to each individual. If you can get beef cheaper from foreign countries, that's fine. But the state shouldn't be buying it. And personally, I do think, regardless, people should be buying local anyway. I'm against tariffs, and but even if something is more expensive that's produced locally, I'll probably be more likely to buy it than something from overseas that's cheaper, because you gotta support the local economy first and foremost, I would say. Next we have Trump is bad, give me karma, from MotherJones.com, posted by SmokeyTrue01. And that's a story about there's no good reason why Hakeem Jeffries should work with Jared Kushner. And yeah, personally, I'm sure Reddit would have loved the subreddit would have loved this and upvoted it like 50 upvotes, but it's only at 29% upvotes currently because I guess they don't like the title. But the title is pretty much what every post on the subreddit is at this point. Trump is bad, give me karma. This is one that actually just is titled that though, so they don't like being called out for it. And yeah, personally, I don't care for Trump and his government corruption, but the government's going to be corrupt regardless of which branch of the Union Party is in power. But of course, Reddit only cares because the current president's member of the out group or the in group, they were completely fine with government corruption under Sleepy Joe. But second Orange Man gets in there, suddenly it's the worst things ever. Next we have Trump is bad, give me karma. That's the same post. That's the same user from last time, SmokeyTrue01, but this is a different article from The Independent. Clear sign yet that Trump believes House will go Democrat. Son-in-law Jared Kushner meets with Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. I guess that's the same subject about the Jeffries and Kushner. And yeah, personally, as I said, I personally think these are some of the best posts on the subreddit I've ever seen because, it's basically, might as well be every post in the subreddit, I don't care for Orange Man, but, you can only say Orange Man bad for so long before it grows stale. I would argue Orange Man bad grew stale even before Election Day 2016, before he even got into the office in the first place, and now it's pretty much been 10 years since then, and it's staler than ever. I don't like Trump, but you should really, every Reddit post is some variation, basically, of Trump/Republicans bad, and it gets kind of stale after a while. If every post was Biden or whoever the next Democratic president or /Democrats bad, that would get stale too. But, even when Biden was in office, every post was still Trump/Republicans bad, and, it just kind of gets tiring after a while. Next we have how Sweden became a country of big state libertarians from Economist.com, posted by Lemon Limelight, and I guess they shared some of the text from the article. Sweden is the paradoxical home of individualism done correct collectively. The case for Sweden being a socialist utopia is as traditional as it is cinnamon buns. This is a country that soaks the rich to fund a government whose spending amounts is nearly half of GDP, among the highest in the world. In Sweden's welfare state, new parents are showered with up to 480 days of paid leave. Other lefty shibboleths include free universities, low income inequality, and the rich world's most sweeping rent controls. 2/3 of working Swedes belong to a trade union, the most of any country, bar tiny Iceland. Yet it's equally fair to argue that Sweden has a libertarian side. The state may be large, but public services in Sweden are often delivered by the private sector. About a third of Swedish children graduating from high school do so at an institution run by non-state operators. Many of them run for profit. Sweden is a rare country with no inheritance tax. During the COVID-19 pandemic, it stood out for imposing fewer restrictions than most countries, where strict lockdowns or mask mandates. It lacks national minimum wage, bucking the norm in rich economies, including America. Employers are largely free to hire and fire, unlike in most of Europe. All this has resulted in Sweden having around 50% more billionaires per person than America. This is socialism is very intense, surprising good for yacht sales. In the rush to claim flair for Sweden's success, both sides get part of the story wrong. The socialist case is more accurate before the state would sharply slimmed down in the early 1990s. Libertarians gushing about the lack of a minimum wage fail to grasp that in most sectors, pay rates are agreed by unions, haggling with employers, hardly the stuff of Milton Friedman's dreams. But the Scandinavian paradox seems to be something more curious as afoot, for Sweden is indeed different. In developed countries, collectivism and individual liberty are generally treated as rivals. The more responsibility the government assumes, the less room remains for citizens to fend for themselves. Sweden followed a different path. During the 20th century, the state expanded not merely to soften inequality or insure people against hardship, but to reduce their reliance on other people, including their own families. A large impersonal state is seen as bolstering autonomy when in need. Swedes feel it is better to be beholden to an impersonal bureaucracy than a parent or some charity. See, this way, a bigger state translates into more freedom, not less. And personally, I don't know if I'd agree with all that, but I definitely do think, just because one country is bad in some aspects doesn't mean it's bad in all aspects, and Sweden's a good example of that. What libertarians need, you need to have as libertarian government as possible, I would say. But, just because the government is authoritarian in some aspects like Sweden doesn't mean it's authoritarian in all aspects, I would say. Next we have, you voted for the promises, now judge the results, posted by Ragnar OKXG, and that's a cross post from the American Hard Mode subreddit. And that's a post from the U.S. Democratic Socialist quoting patriotic blonde. I think she's an X account. 92% of counterranchers in America voted for Trump. He just bankrupted them all. And yeah, it just goes to show, it's when a lot of voting is just either getting decided to get either stabbed in the back or stabbed in the front. Trump's very much a stab you in the back candidate, while I'd argue Kamala was much more stab you in the front candidate. It doesn't really matter though. If voting really, I always like to say, if voting really mattered, they wouldn't let us do it. It's all pretty much just a WWE style farce. I would say the real power in Washington lies in the shadows. Deep state, military, industrial complex, satanic cabal of lizard people, whatever you want to call them. And that's my thoughts there. And I had a post I wanted to share from the Libertarian Party USA subreddit as well. I said, bureaucratic bullshit has come to my dreams. Nowhere is safe. And I said, so I was having a dream when you were a younger version of me, who was still in school, was about to go on a trip to Maine with a teacher and two other students of his. We were in the car ready to go, but then we learned that there was a law in the books that a teacher would need at least 90 students to be able to go on a trip. No idea if this is an actual law. I can see an argument about if we're not letting teachers go on trips with single students for grooming reasons, but that's still too much state interference. I'm out, so we couldn't go. Thoughts? And yeah, personally, I think that's a good argument of how much statism is built in people that, it's even starting to appear in your dreams, you can't do this because there's a law against it. And, it's ultimately, it just goes to show you that, the state is so all-encompassing, people won't do anything that if there's a law against it, even if, it might not be an actual law. And it just goes to show you that, there's no law so stupid that law enforcement officers wouldn't enforce it. And, I just found this interesting because, libertarians and vegans bureaucratic bullshit and how inescapable it is. I'm sorry that not every post can be a variation of Trump/Republicans bad. As was one guy saying, oh, you should have kept your thoughts to yourself. And yeah, personally, I think, ultimately it just goes to show you that the state, it's just so big and powerful that, even in your dreams you can't escape it. Nowhere is safe when it comes to escaping the power of the state, I would say, and that's why it was a big reason why I shared that, and that's my thoughts on that issue. And let's see if there's anything new. So, let's see. Looks like there's nothing new. Let me just check one more. Looks like there's nothing new. So we're gonna wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.